Okay, so you want to buy a private airport. Find some runway, hire some controllers, watch the landing fees roll in. But here's the strange part. An airport is the only business in the world where you can charge a plane $8,000 just to land and still somehow be losing money by Tuesday. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how that's possible, how private airports actually make money on the inside, why most of the revenue has nothing to do with planes, and why the smartest infrastructure investors on the planet keep betting billions on a business the government has been running for a century. Private airports, meaning airports that are privately owned or operated rather than run directly by the government, come in three shapes. And they are three completely different businesses. At the bottom is the general aviation airfield, a simple strip, maybe 3,000 feet of asphalt, a single hangar, and a fuel pump in the middle of nowhere. These sell for anywhere from a couple $100,000 to about $3 million depending on land size and location. For that money, you get Cessnas, crop dusters, and the occasional weekend pilot who needed somewhere to put his Cirrus. Not glamorous, recession-resistant, the most boring business in aviation. The middle tier is the regional commercial airport. Think a mid-sized city: Chattanooga, Palm Springs, Bozeman. These cost $50 million to $500 million, depending on whether you're buying into an existing operation or building new terminals. You get airline service, a couple of gate lounges, a Chili's too, and about 2 million passengers a year who'd rather not drive 4 hours to the nearest hub. This is where most privatization action is happening right now. And then there's the top tier, the privatized hub: London Gatwick, Brussels Airport, Athens International, Brisbane. These are airports handling 20 to 50 million passengers a year, and they get sold for anywhere from $1 billion to over $16 billion. In 2021, when global infrastructure partners Blackstone and Cascade Investment, the vehicle controlled by Bill Gates, completed their joint acquisition of Signature Aviation, the world's largest fixed-base operator network, they paid $4.6 billion. For a company that essentially runs the private terminals inside other airports. That number tells you everything about how seriously serious money takes this business. Before you see $1 of revenue, you have to survive the regulatory layer. And in aviation, that layer is thick. In the United States, the FAA doesn't actually issue airport licenses the way you'd get a liquor license. Instead, airports that want to serve commercial airlines need an airport operating certificate under Part 139 of the federal regulations. That certification requires compliance with everything from runway safety areas to snow removal plans to wildlife hazard management programs. The inspections are ongoing. The paperwork never stops. The compliance tab at a commercial airport runs from $500,000 to several $1 million a year just to stay legal. And here's the catch nobody tells you about up front. If you accept a single federal airport improvement program grant at any point in your airport's history, you inherit 20 years of FAA obligations. You must keep the airport open for public use. You cannot raise rates in ways the FAA considers discriminatory. You cannot divert airport revenue to non-airport uses. The FAA can claw back grant money if you close the airport or change its use. The government gave you $4 million for a new taxiway in 2009, and now it is 2025, and you still owe them an airport. This is why truly private airports, ones with no federal strings, are rare, and why the ones that exist are treated like precious assets. Outside the US, the licensing math gets even weirder. In the UK, major airports are regulated by the Civil Aviation Authority, which can impose price controls on what Heathrow charges airlines for a landing slot. In Macau, the government has a stranglehold on airport concessions the same way it controls casinos. In some countries, getting the right to operate an international airport requires winning a government tender that takes a decade, 50 lawyers, and a very specific relationship with whoever is running the infrastructure ministry this year. If the casino license is a lottery ticket, the airport concession is a government contract negotiated in 3 languages with no guarantee of renewal. Here's the part most people get completely backwards. If you think an airport makes money from planes, you're about a half-century out of date. Every airport has 2 buckets of revenue. The first is aeronautical, the money that actually comes from aviation. Landing fees, aircraft parking, gate rentals, terminal fees charged to airlines. This is what most people picture. At a major international airport, aeronautical revenue typically covers about 40 to 50% of total income. The second bucket is everything else, non-aeronautical revenue, and this is where the real game is played. Retail concessions, duty-free shops, food and beverage, car parking, real estate on airport land, advertising, car rentals, hotel rooms. In 2024, the global market for airport non-aeronautical revenue was valued at over $133 billion, growing at nearly 8% a year. Parking alone accounts for 28 to 34% of non-aeronautical income at US airports, with more than 80 million vehicles annually using airport parking facilities. At major international hubs, non-aeronautical revenue makes up 40 to 60% of total airport revenues. Think about that. If you own a major airport, more than half your money might have nothing to do with a single aircraft ever taking off. Changi Airport in Singapore, consistently rated the best airport in the world, is essentially a luxury retail mall with runways attached. It has a waterfall, a butterfly garden, and a rooftop pool. The airport serves over 60 million passengers a year. Singapore understood something that most airport operators are still figuring out. The plane is the reason people show up, but what they do in the terminal is where the margin lives. The math works because airports have a captive audience that is uniquely irrational with money. Passengers arrive early due to security requirements, have nowhere else to go, and are psychologically primed by travel anxiety and the act of leaving normal life. They pay $22 for a burger they would never order at home. They buy a bottle of perfume in duty-free because it's technically a deal. They park for 8 days and quietly accept a bill that would cover a week's groceries. The parking lot is the most quietly profitable piece of real estate in the aviation world. It requires zero specialized aviation knowledge to operate. It never misses a flight, and the customers have literally no alternative. Now, for the most interesting sub-business inside the private airport world, the fixed base operator. An FBO is, in simple terms, the private terminal. When a Gulfstream lands at a major airport, it does not pull up to the United Airlines gate. It rolls to the FBO. The passengers step into a private lounge. Customs comes to them. A car is waiting on the ramp. The plane gets refueled, catered, and serviced by a crew in matching uniforms who actually seem happy to be there. This is a completely different product from commercial aviation, and it is an extraordinarily profitable one. FBOs make money 4 ways. Fuel is the biggest. Over 50% of most FBO revenues comes from selling Jet A fuel at a markup to private and business aircraft. Think of it as a gas station where the customers are too busy and too rich to shop around. Hangar rental is second. Leasing space to aircraft owners who need somewhere to store their $25 million jet out of the weather. Ground handling third. The ramp crew, the luggage, the aircraft towing, the de-icing in winter, and then the premium services, the concierge, the catering, the customs facilitation, the crew accommodation. Mid-sized FBOs ran operating expenses of over $4 million annually in 2023. But the revenue side at a top-tier location at a busy airport can run well into the tens of millions. The economics are location-dependent in a way that makes a Manhattan restaurant look diversified. An FBO at Teterboro, the preferred private aviation airport for New York City, prints money in ways that an FBO at a secondary regional airport simply cannot replicate. This is why Signature Aviation, the world's largest FBO network with over 360 locations, was worth $4.6 billion. It wasn't just 360 lounges, it was 360 locations with captive fuel customers, long-term land leases at major airports, and a brand that private aviation operators trust to have a consistent product from New York to London to Singapore. When a private equity firm buys into this sector, they're not buying a services company. They're buying a real estate portfolio that happens to be located inside airports. The math on airport ownership looks clean until you actually start operating. The first killer is infrastructure. A runway is not concrete you pour once and forget. It is a constantly degrading asset that requires continuous maintenance, regular resurfacing, and eventual full reconstruction at costs that run into the tens of millions. Instrument landing systems, runway lighting, air traffic control equipment, wildlife management, because a bird strike that brings down a regional jet is not a good year for anyone. The capital expenditure cycle at a mid-sized commercial airport runs $20 to $50 million a year. A major hub can spend 10 times that. The second killer is labor. A real commercial airport operation employs thousands of people. Security, ground handling, operations, maintenance, customer service, management. Payroll is the largest single expense line, and unlike a casino, you cannot run lean during slow periods. An airport that can handle 100 flights a day needs to be capable of handling 100 flights a day every day, regardless of how many are actually booked. The third killer, and this one is genuinely underrated, is liability. Aviation law is uniquely punishing. A commercial airport that has a runway incursion, a ground collision, or any incident involving an aircraft can face federal investigations, lawsuits from multiple jurisdictions, and insurance claims that take years to resolve. The liability insurance premiums for a Part 139 commercial airport are a significant line item, and that's before anything actually goes wrong. The fourth killer is geopolitics dressed up as airline relations. Your two biggest airline tenants decide to hub operations 3 states over. Your anchor carrier gets acquired, and the new parent company reroutes the profitable transcons to its other hub. You go from 4 million annual passengers to 2 million in 18 months, and every single piece of your commercial, retail, and parking revenue cuts in half with it. A casino can't lose its customers overnight. An airport can. Two mistakes show up over and over again in every notable airport ownership failure. Mistake 1 is the same as it is in casinos: catastrophic debt. When a private developer finances an airport acquisition or construction with high-yield debt, which is the only financing available for greenfield airport projects without government backing, they need the airport to produce revenue from almost day one. Airports take years to build passenger volume. Airlines need time to develop routes. Passengers need time to change travel habits. The debt service clock has no patience for any of that. The Stephenville Airport in Newfoundland was sold to a private operator for essentially $690 plus the assumption of existing debts, an airport that cost millions to build, available for less than the price of lunch. Because the combination of required capital expenditure and insufficient traffic made the numbers impossible. Mistake 2 is misreading what the market actually wants. An airport is not primarily an aviation asset. It is a real estate and commercial asset that requires aviation to exist. When private airport operators focus only on the aviation economics, the landing fees, the gate revenues, the aeronautical charges, and neglect the commercial mix, they lose the game. The airports that have succeeded under private ownership, Brussels, Athens, Brisbane, Gatwick, are the ones that attack the retail, parking, and real estate layer with the same aggression they brought to managing airside operations. Brisbane Airport built an entirely new commercial precinct adjacent to the terminal. Athens International turned its landside into one of the best shopping experiences in Greece. Private equity firms that doubled airport operating income did it mostly through higher revenues from airlines and retailers, not cost-cutting. The runway is overhead, the terminal is the product. So how much do you actually make if you do this right? Scenario 1. $5 million regional airfield, Midwest USA. Annual revenue may be $2 to $3 million from fuel markups, hangar rentals, and tie-down fees. After costs, maintenance, FAA compliance, insurance, staff, you're clearing $400,000 to $700,000 a year in profit. Payback, 8 to 12 years. No glamour. Unlikely to go bankrupt if you run it conservatively. The agricultural land around it is probably worth more than the airport. Scenario 2. $600 million regional commercial airport, mid-sized Sunbelt city, 2 million passengers a year. Annual revenue including aeronautical and non-aeronautical streams, approximately $80 to $120 million. After debt service, capital expenditure, operating costs and taxes, net operating income somewhere between $15 and $30 million. That's a 3 to 5% return on investment in year 1, growing as you optimize the commercial mix and passenger volume increases. If you've structured the financing right and chosen a growing market, you're looking at a genuinely excellent infrastructure asset that compounds over decades. Scenario 3 is the real prize, but it's almost never for sale. The privatized hub. Gatwick was sold to global infrastructure partners in 2009 for $2.4 billion. In the years that followed, investment in the commercial offer, terminal upgrades, and operational efficiency turned it into one of the most financially productive airports in the world. GIP later sold a majority stake, valuing the airport at roughly $4.5 billion. They doubled their money on an airport. Step back for a second and the real picture comes into focus. A private airport is not an aviation business. It's a real estate business with regulated monopoly characteristics, operating in a captive audience consumer environment with aviation as the delivery mechanism. You don't own a runway. You own 500 acres of strategically located commercial real estate that the government has guaranteed you a right to monetize in perpetuity. As long as you keep the planes moving. The planes bring the people spend the money. The money funds the infrastructure brings more planes. Every great private airport operator understood this loop before their competitors did. The ones who went broke thought they were in the aviation business. The ones who got rich understood they were in the parking lot, duty-free, and terminal retail business. They just needed a runway to fill the building. So, if you do decide to buy a private airport, just remember the most important rule of this industry. The house edge isn't on the runway, it's in the terminal.